Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. We're so excited to talk about new ideas for engaging your remote workforce. We're going to get started in just a few minutes, right at 10 o'clock Pacific. Feel free to get situated. And over the chat, I'm going to be pasting out 2 quick links for some ebooks you want to check out just to continue remote workforce. Meantime, too, personally, I'm calling in from San Diego, visiting our office of Blueboard down here, and it is quite, oh my gosh. There we go, okay. A little gloomy here and phone call-y as well. Wishing for some true San Diego sun. Looks like we've got a lot of people dialing in New York, Germany, which is amazing. Lots of Seattle and West Coast, even somebody from London and Slovenia. Amazing. So glad you're tuning in so late in the day. And we'll get started in just 1 more minute. Thank you, everybody.
Saturn. I like that.
Welcome from Saturn. Who knew they had Wi-Fi out there? Love it. All right, and I'm going to paste those resources again so everybody has them handy. Boston and Chicago, welcome.
Yeah, Boston, represent.
Karen, how do you really feel about Boston?
Well, it's beautiful and sunny here, so it sounds like it's the place to be.
Someone says, go Bruins, yes. Love it. All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started. We're at 10:01 Pacific. Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining our conversation today. Again, we're gonna be discussing new ideas for engaging your remote workforce, which is such a huge topic. We're gonna get into a lot of great stats, but as we know, the workforce is changing every single day, and it's going to be incredibly important to continue offering flexible work options to your employees as a tool for attracting and retaining your top talent. By way of quick introduction, my name is Morgan Cheney. I'm our Director of Marketing and Partnerships here at Blueboard, and I also co-lead our Culture Committee, focused especially on the candidate experience, onboarding, and creating warm welcomes. With me is Shane Metcalf. He is the co-founder and Chief Culture Officer at 15Five. And just for a way to everyone get to know each other, we're gonna ask, in the spirit of our other sponsor, Donut, what is everybody's favorite donut? So Shane, we will start with you. Feel free to say hello and share what your favorite donut is.
Hello, welcome everybody. Really excited for the call today. And okay, favorite donut is, I think they are called Pebble Donuts. And they're these vegan donuts. I don't know if they have them beyond the Bay Area, but a blueberry cake donut. Jillian, you nailed it. And it is so good. Like, cake donuts dominate the donut game. It's always a disappointing experience when I have a non-cake donut, and it always makes me want one of the vegan cake blueberry donuts.
Yes, I was actually going to steal the same thunder. I am a huge blueberry cake donut fan as well. But I'm also a big just donut hole fan, and we'll end up being like, oh, I'll have a half dozen. It's like the same as a donut. And then it's like, or I'll have a whole dozen. It's totally fine.
The best thing about the cake donuts is when you get like the crispy texture on the bottom, when it's a little harder, a little crunchier. Oh.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And on the chat, feel free to share what your favorite donuts are as well. Are you a donut fan? Or are you a donut hole fan? Feel free to take a team side.
Oh, and then also, just I'm dialing in from Palo Alto, though I work in San Francisco and live in the East Bay. And again, it's part of the beauty of remote culture is that I can do this webinar from wherever. And it's just pretty amazing.
Absolutely. Welcome, Shane. Thank you. Next, we have Karen Rubin, who's the VP of Growth at OwlLabs. Welcome, Karen, and let us know what your favorite donut is.
Thanks so much. It's very exciting to be here. As I already said, I'm from Boston, so I think I have to go with a Boston cream, obviously. But reality was, long before I was a VP of Growth at OwlLabs, I worked in a donut shop for 3 years in high school.
No way.
So what I have learned is that the best donut is the donut that's been out of the fryer about 3 minutes.
Yep.
That's not too hot, but it's perfectly fresh. So any donut that's that fresh is my favorite donut.
Love it. Thank you, Karen. And last but not least, we have Dan Mannion, who is the co-founder and CEO at Donut. Welcome, Dan, and I'm sure you have lots of opinions on this subject.
Yeah, so thanks for having me and welcome everybody, and thanks for the donut conversation. This is more than I bargained for. I actually, if I had to pick one favorite, it's also Boston cream, but I probably eat more donuts than the rest of the panelists, so I like a healthy variety. And I actually think Karen nailed it. When I go to my favorite donut shop in New York, I ask them which came out of the fire most recently. So.
Perfect. Dan, welcome everybody. All right, so jumping into a little bit more about our host, we're going to go one by one and share a little bit more about why our companies were passionate about creating this space today and really talking about remote culture. I'll lead us off sharing a little bit about Blueboard. For those of you who aren't familiar, we're a rewards and recognition platform, ultimately rewarding employees who go above and beyond, who are maybe celebrating a work anniversary or referring someone to the company, going above and beyond in their role, with their choice of a menu of experiences instead of cash or gift cards. So as you can see on screen, experiences are wonderful for engaging a remote workforce because they are highly shareable. Not many of us will talk about what we did with a gift card or with the cash bonus you received, and we often will spend it on things that we need versus things that we want or have been looking forward to trying. So with experiences, you're not only able to treat yourself and do something really memorable and personalized, but have this amazing content that is so ripe for sharing. And we find that across our 4+ remote offices, experiences have been an amazing way to bond our employees after they go out and about with a welcome gift, for example, to celebrate their anniversary, or for some of the spot rewards we go out, including things like hawk walks or painting classes, Broadway shows, or even going to Iceland for a fancy trip. So if you want to learn more on Blueboard, feel free to check us out at blueboard.com/experiences. And from there, I will pass it over to Shane to introduce 15.5.
Great, thanks, Morgan. So 15.5, we are a continuous performance management solution that helps employees grow and develop in 15 minutes a week. We essentially believe that the world is moving away from the annual performance review as the primary source for feedback and growth, and we need to create continuous feedback loops inside of companies. That is really how you ask the better questions, and you will have better conversations, and you are going to really watch your people unlock their potential. So we do goals recognition, check-ins, one-on-ones, performance reviews. It's an entire suite to manage your people and help them do the best work of their lives.
Perfect. Thank you, Shane. Let's move on to OwlLabs. Take it away, Karen.
Thanks so much. So at OwlLabs, we're the creators of the Meeting Owl, which is a 360-degree video conferencing camera. The idea behind it is we want to make location irrelevant so meetings are really effective and productive no matter where you are. And where we started is with those collaborative meetings where you've got 4 or 5 people in the room and some folks on the other end that have a much harder time joining in and really seeing what's going on. So the owl lets you see everybody in the room, and then it really intelligently highlights the folks who are talking so that you can see them up close and personal and really feel more engaged in the conversation.
Perfect. Thank you, Karen. And let's get a quick overview of Donut as well.
We actually don't make donuts. I'm sorry to disappoint everybody after that conversation. We have built a platform that helps companies drive their company culture, largely through helping build connectivity across your employees. So we have a number of different products that are very deeply integrated into Slack. One of our products helps by basically introducing folks that don't necessarily work together to meet up for either a cup of coffee, or if you're remote, like in this example here I have on this screen, jump on a video call like a Zoom, and actually get to know somebody in your company that you may not have met before. We also have a tool that is really focused on employee onboarding. We believe kind of the employee experience, you really have to nail those first few days and weeks and months. And we have a tool that allows you to build a really structured onboarding program. Things like running a buddy system for new hires, making sure they get the right information and ramp up in their role.
Perfect. Thank you, Dan. All right, just to jump into our agenda and a few quick housekeeping items. First, we're going to chat through the state of the remote workplace, a few stats and figures to know as you're thinking about planning a business case, for example, and having the conversation internally with your key stakeholders. From there, Karen will talk through a few benefits of really creating not just a strategic, but a meaningful remote work experience. How do you really set yourself up for success, and what are the outcomes that you see when you have a flexible work environment offered to your employees? From there, we'll talk through some of our own best practices, including cultural rituals for increasing belonging and inclusivity. And then as well, at the very end, new ideas for engaging and celebrating your remote workforce. As we know, those even small daily celebrations are really what make people excited to come to work every day. We will have time for some Q&A. I try to get as a stopping point, just the chat or through the Q&A tool that you'll see at the bottom. And we actually have collected a lot of amazing questions from the audience just through the registration process. So we'll be sharing a lot of those on screen. You might see your name pop up to be a celebrity for a moment on our webinar. But yes, please feel free to lean on chat and Q&A if you have questions along the way. Otherwise, the lines will be muted. For those who are seeking their SHRM professional development credit, we will be sharing that at the very end. You must be present to receive that code, so please stick around for that. And in the case that you do have to drop off, we'll be producing a recording and written recap that will be going out by end of day tomorrow. So that will be shared with anyone who's RSVP'd, just in the case that you have to drop off early. So without further ado, we will go ahead and jump into it. I'm going to pass it over to Dan, who's going to walk us through the state of the remote workplace. Thank you, Dan.
Awesome. So to kick us off, I'm going to walk through a few statistics that just kind of highlight how important the trend of remote work is, with some kind of general stats, and then kind of with some of our own research. So if you want to, so first of all is that half of the workforce will actually be remote by 2020. This is from a Gallup poll, and I hate to be the bearer of this news, but 2020 is actually right around the corner. So so this isn't a trend that's far away. We're actually right here. And that kind of brings us to the next stat, which is already today, more than half of employees report that they work from home at least once per week. So even if they're not fully remote, there's obviously a ton of workers that are working in a hybrid environment. The next stat is that actually when you look at what's driving millennials' decisions about where they want to go work, 69% of them will trade other work benefits for flexible workspace options. So more and more companies are realizing that to attract and retain the best talent, being more flexible with remote work or hybrid options is really, really important. And then finally, a piece of data from our own work at Donut. We have thousands of companies using our product. We've made millions of introductions. And actually among all of our companies, 74% of them are using Donut to pair remote employees. So just kind of a staggering trend with all this data. So now I'd actually like to turn it over to all of you and ask you all a question, an audience poll question, which is what percentage of your workforce is fully remote, and then what percentage is flexible? So you should all see the poll popped up, and we'll give a few seconds to answer that.
I wanted to vote and it won't let me.
Karen, what percentage of OwlLabs is remote?
Yeah, so we're in Boston. We're 40 people, but about 35% of our team is fully remote, and I would say the rest is very flexible.
Yeah, we're 120 people, and I think we're at 43% are distributed.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. I'm going to go ahead and end this first poll. It looks like 62%, the bulk of us, have a workforce that's just 0 to 25%. So you should be able to show those and see those on screen. Perfect.
So I think I'm going to turn it over now.
We will go ahead and pass it over to Karen, who's going to walk us through the benefits of having a strategic employee experience for those who are remote.
Great. So there are all sorts of benefits. These stats come from the state of the remote work that we ran last fall. And one of the really interesting things that we learned is that people who work remotely at least once per month are 24% more likely to feel happy and productive in their roles. And so that level of flexibility gives them more happiness and productivity, which I think is wonderful. We can all agree. The next step and what that leads to for a business is that those companies that allow remote work experience 25% less employee turnover. So having that remote work not only makes your employees happier and more productive, it also then allows them to stay at your company longer so you don't have to recruit new people, which is pretty exciting. Which I think brings us to our first audience Q&A, which comes from Dina, which asks whether or not remote employees, remote team members are really more productive. And I think this is a really good question that highlights one of the concerns people have about remote work. Productivity is very hard to measure, no matter what. And I think traditionally a lot of people use FaceTime in the office to measure it, which is why this question even comes up. And I would definitely encourage folks to look for metrics, accountable stats to understand how the team's doing as opposed to FaceTime. I know for myself, in the office, there's a lot of conversations that come up and a lot of meetings. And so every Thursday morning, I devote myself to work from home, which is really a time for me to catch up and get everything done so that I can be productive. And it is that home time that's the most productive. But because productivity is hard to measure, but if your employees are feeling more productive and happier, that goes a long way to actually getting more done. I don't know, Shane, Dan, do either of you have something to think about that one?
Yeah, I think that you can be a total slacker at the office and you can be a total slacker at home. And so really it's almost not the right question, because really it's looking at how do you get people into high states of flow. And that's really, I think, one of the better questions. And so if you have a culture of deep work, if you're putting in investment and asking the right questions around how do you achieve deep work, because working at home does provide a bit more of an opportunity to get into deep work. But you have to turn off all your distractions. You have to turn off Slack. You have to set some boundaries. And you can do that in the office. It is easier to do it at home, but you need to equip your people with that. And you also need to be putting in place clear objectives for your people, clear sense of purpose, and actually getting people in the right roles and leveraging their strengths. That is how you really unlock productivity.
I think that's a great point. So the next question that comes up is some best practices for selling remote and flexible work arrangements to your CEO and leadership team. And this comes from Deborah. I think this is a really good question. When I first saw this one, my thought was, I don't actually have a great response to this because I've been really fortunate to work in companies that have always encouraged flexibility and allowed for remote work. And so, Shane, I think you had some thoughts about how you might sell this to your CEOs or leadership team.
Well, I think that it's interesting because we definitely have some people on our own leadership team. Like as founders, we're all very supportive of flexible working arrangements. And we have some people that are a little more skeptical. And I think that one of the things that is really illuminating is when you get to see people that say, I won't work at this company if I'm not able to work at home 2 days a week. And you start to understand that by allowing that kind of flexibility, your retention can go way up. In 7 years, we've only had 3 people voluntarily leave our company. And so that's incredibly high retention. And I know that if we didn't have that kind of flexibility, that we wouldn't have that kind of retention. And so if you start to calculate your employee lifetime value, you can start to make a financial argument to your CEO that by providing some flexibility, you can keep your people longer, because fundamentally, I think that remote work fulfills a need for an intrinsic motivation we have as humans for autonomy. We want to be able to kind of author our own story, and a little bit of flexibility goes a long way in feeling autonomous.
Absolutely. It also ties back to that first stat, or the second stat that I shared pretty nicely about companies having 25% less turnover. And if you can prove to your boss how that would affect the bottom line and how much more productive people would be if they didn't have to recruit all the time, that's a great way to make the case.
Yeah, the cost estimate between 1 and 4x of somebody's annual salary to replace them. And so if you can extend that by 2 months, let alone 2 years, it's a profound financial implications for your company.
Great.
I think I agree with all of that. One of my favorite kind of analogies that I actually heard from one of our customers was, imagine two people are starting a new soccer team or football team, depending on where you are in the world. And one manager is recruiting from one city and the other is recruiting from the entire world. Who do you think is going to end up with the better team? So I think it just opens up so much, both from a retention, but also a recruiting standpoint.
Yeah, and then finally, one other note there, definitely feel free to include messaging around flexible work environments in your biannual or annual engagement surveys. We actually just launched ours this week, and we do have a question specific to feeling if the company supports flexible working environments, because we do want to focus on that and make sure that our remote teams feel like they're taken care of and set up for success. Great. I think we can move on to the next section. Thank you, Karen, for walking us through that, and Dan as well. Moving into cultural rituals to help promote belonging and inclusivity, which is so important, knowing that remote workers, especially if they're maybe working from a home office, might feel a little bit isolated. There's lots of best practices for opening them up and making sure they're part of the group and that communication is strong. So some of the questions that we're going to lead in with, the first is from Raisa from Jackpot Joy Group. And she asks, how do you really eliminate the mentality of us versus them? So us being maybe the HQ team and them being remote workers. It's definitely something that we can fall into by accident sometimes, but is great to overcome in as an organization and stemming from leadership. But Karen, would love to start with you just to see what your thoughts are there.
I think one of the key things to do this is over communication and really being focused on who you've communicated with and communicating equally. The thing that folks who are remote really miss out on is walking around the office, bumping into someone in senior leadership and being able to just ask some questions or hear how things are going. And so one of the things I try to do here with our remote teams is regularly check in with them more so than I do with my in-office folks. Just be like, hey, is everything okay? Need a quick video call? How are you doing? Because that gives, I'm a talker, you might have noticed already, but that gives me the option to give them the things that are top of mind that they might miss otherwise. But I think it comes down a lot to over communication and then encouraging others to do that as well. I had actually never heard of Donut before this webinar, and I want to do it with our team here because I think it's a great opportunity to pull different people together and have those conversations and pull everyone into the same place so that they understand. One last point there is also having remote opportunities across the organization is good because then every team has the empathy for their own remote teammate. You're going to understand the person you need to work with every day more closely than a person you interface with once a month. And so if you have some teams that are entirely located in the office, they're going to have a harder time understanding the folks that are remote, especially because they don't interact with them on an ongoing basis. So making it something that is organization-wide so that everybody has this opportunity and is working with each other is a great place to start.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other thoughts from the panelists?
Yeah, I'd highly recommend reading a book called Tribal Leadership. And in it, it really describes really interesting phases of development that companies go through. And, kind of stage 3 is I'm awesome, you suck. And it's a very I-centric mentality of the HQ is the best and remote workers are slackers. But then when you go into stage 4, yeah, Maria, it is Tribal Leadership by Dave Logan. Stage 4 is when you move into we are awesome. And it's really that switch from I to we, because any company can have us versus them, even if you're all in one group. You can still have schisms and silos. And so what you really want to do is you want to create such a strong culture that it creates unity of everyone understanding, yes, we are a part of the same tribe. We are all 15 fivers. Mm-hmm. A friend in the military said that the biggest thing he learned in the military was that unity is the single greatest force multiplier known to man. And so what you want to be doing is you really want to make sure that you are continually creating shared experiences and shared contexts where people are collaborating together across departments towards a common goal. And that is when the us versus them kind of falls to the wayside. And I think it's less about I think it's more of a cultural systemic issue than it is HQ versus distributed folks.
Mm-hmm. And I think just encouraging leadership to take the lead there, right? So Shane, I love that you brought up reading that book and really championing that down from your position and leadership through the organization and making sure that everyone's on that same page of saying that we are this one team. And once leadership adopts that, it's so much easier for the rest of the team to follow suit.
It's also really helpful. We have some of the people on the senior leadership team are distributed as well. And so there's not a sense that, oh, well, if you want to be taken seriously in the company or if you want to be senior management, you have to be in one of the offices, because that sets the precedence that no, it's actually completely equal opportunity there.
Yes, absolutely. Wonderful. Jumping into our next question, how do you support a warm welcome for remote employees during onboarding? And I was excited to jump into this one, I'll share a few quick best practices we do at Blueboard. And just for background, we have 3 different main offices in different parts of the world, actually. And then we have about 5 additional employees who work remote. So a few things we do, even just during the interview process, as soon as someone accepts an offer, we have the entire interview panel call them and talk to them and congratulate them and let them know how excited we are for them to be joining us. So that initially kind of creates this conversation community, even though that person might be accepting their offer at home, wherever they are, everyone's reaching out to them and really welcoming them on. So that starts a nice precedent of just inclusion across the board. As a way to kind of eat our own dog food at Blueboard, being an experiential rewards company, we do offer 2 different rounds of welcome gifts that are kind of surprise and delight to that new hire as they are joining the company. One is a type of care package, and we did have a few questions come through during the registration about care packages. The first drop is really kind of small things like funky socks or tea, coffees, things like that, to kind of just make them feel comfortable and excited to have some stuff to decorate their desks with, for example. And then we also offer them a Blueboard reward, which is their way to not only experience our product and share their feedback on what it's like to go through the entire journey as a reward recipient, but also to really feel like they've been on a Blueboarding experience as well, and they have that time to really reflect and enjoy and treat themselves before they start this next chapter. So we ask that they do complete that experience within the first 30 days, and then they're able to, through Slack and through channels like that, share those photos and memories, which is a really great way for them to expose what they chose. And maybe we learn that they went skydiving for the first time and maybe had a fear of heights or brought their family to a museum, and we get to know them a little bit deeper that way. But because it's a digital service, we're able to see those photos after their experience and really bond through those memories together. Additionally, we do use things like Donut to continue that onboarding moment. We just launched Donut actually, I think 2 weeks ago. We got out of our trial, and we're using that as a way to keep communication top of mind and to really make that new hire feel welcome with regards to almost over communication and understanding of what that first week, what those first 30 days are going to look like by having one-on-ones arranged for them, training set up, things like that. So just to summarize, it's really all about team unity as soon as they accept their offer, giving them some surprise and delight, an opportunity to try out Blueboard before they join, and then the ability for them to have a really nice landing with a lot of organization so they feel taken care of. But I'd love to share also, I think Dan wanted to comment on that as well. How are you guys creating a warm welcome for your team at the Donate HQ?
Yeah, so actually I wanted to touch a little bit on what we've seen our customers do and how remote onboarding can look a little different than onboarding when you're all in the same office. One of the big trends that we've seen is when you're all co-located, you can kind of get away with being a little bit more ad hoc for longer in the company life cycle. People come in, they meet a whole bunch of folks, you can go to lunch together. But then, once you're in the hundreds, you really need to start structuring things. With remote teams, we've seen that breaking point where the need for some structure and process really kicks in much, much earlier because they don't have somebody sitting next to them that they can turn to with a question. They're sort of isolated at home. So making sure that you find ways to create as many different kind of human connections and touch points as possible. So things like buddy systems, things like mentor programs, so that in their first day and weeks, they're not just interacting with their manager and maybe somebody in people ops, they're actually meeting a bunch of different folks and getting assimilated into the culture in a much more structured way.
Morgan, I'd love to chime in. There's something we do for all of our introductions of new hires So we have 3 all hands meetings every week with all 120 15 fivers. And we always introduce new hires on Monday, and we do a thing called Role and Soul. And so there's introducing the people in their role and what they do, but also a little bit of like who they are as a human. And so there's a couple of different questions they can answer. One of which is like, who are your grandparents and what did they do? And people share stories about their grandparents. And it's always so amazing because you give this opportunity to get a peek at who people are beyond the mask of our professional persona. Right. And what it does is it creates a shared sense of humanity. Mm-hmm. And that is really, I think, one of the most powerful things we can do is to see people for the complex, dynamic, complete human beings that they really are. And that is one of the best things we've found for creating a warm introduction of like, oh, this is something different going on here.
Yeah, and even introducing a little bit of a vein of vulnerability or just openness as people are fully engaged when someone might be sharing something personal about their life. So that's really important to do as well. Cool. All right, as we move on, next question is, thinking about meetings, and this can be, I think, one of the bigger headaches when you are managing a remote workforce, making sure everybody's dialed in, can hear, can see each other, etc. So Karen from Weirdly asks, what's the best way to run meetings or virtual brainstorms that include both remote and in the same room team members? And Karen, I'd love to kick that off to you first.
Karen's got to talk to Karen. There aren't a lot of us, so it's special. This is actually a great question. It's one that we spend a lot of time here thinking about. And I will tell you, before working at Owl, I thought about it a lot less. And one of the things that I've seen work so well here is that our founders are incredibly conscious of the people on the other end of the call all of the time. And it is part of the culture that they're always watching for that moment when someone tries to say something or sort of puts up their hand or like gets that look on their face. It indicates they've got a thought. And just not calling them out in a bad way, but saying, hey, Aaron, do you have something to say? Or Howard, did you have a thought there? And being really conscious of the people that are across the video conference line. It's very easy to do that in a room with somebody, and it takes effort to do it when the person is on the TV screen and everyone else is sitting around the table. And what I've seen happen is just because the two of them were so conscious about this from the get-go, everyone else has learned how to do it as well. And so now we have a culture where when you have 1 or 2 people who are remote and 5 people in the room, those people get as many opportunities to speak because we're all focused on them and thinking about like giving them that opportunity when they need it. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of different ways to do that, but that's one that we found to work really well.
Yeah, I think
also the Owl helps.
Yeah, I was going to comment on that. I think just at the baseline, like infrastructure, as we've been growing our San Diego office and San Francisco teams as well, we invested in a lot of infrastructure and really had someone own the technology to make sure that we could have effective meetings. And really, it's not just about the connection during the meeting itself, but also just the time savings of being able to start a meeting quickly instead of having to wait for like the tech to work and everything to dial in and everything. Those are precious minutes that are impacting productivity if you don't have good tech in place. So while it can be a little bit of time to get everything coordinated, once it's in place, it's amazing. And you can then kind of have almost a rule of conduct of how you run meetings. That's another recommendation as well, as almost like communication guidelines. I've heard of a few companies drafting those and sharing them publicly, and we're working on our own version now, so that you can write out things like everyone has to have video on, or maybe if you're in the same room, we actually still have a practice of people dialing in on their own computer so that we can still be framed individually and continue to use Zoom tools. So we do try to apply that, and of course video on, and we are recording all meetings now just in case people will have to miss, leveraging chat, things like that to make sure that everybody is aligned. So those rules of engagement are great to document as well and make sure that the team is adopting. Shane or Dan, did you guys want to comment on this as well? Any best practices to share?
I think just one thing kind of building on some of the other comments was to help build empathy for the folks that aren't in the room, make sure that everybody experiences that at least once or at least every now and then. So even if they're at HQ and they're usually in the room, make sure they join the meeting remotely here and there, even if that means going to a phone booth and doing it, just to build that empathy of what it feels like to be the person on the other side.
That's a great point. We do that all the time, or we did early on because we were testing our hardware, but it led to that exact empathy that you're speaking about of just making some people go sit in a different conference room so that they can understand what it is to be on that other end of the call.
Mm-hmm.
I think that somebody that's a good facilitator is going to go a long way here, because they're going to be paying attention. Is there equilibrium between the people in the room and the distributed folks? Are we hearing from all the voices? And this goes back to, again, just kind of basics of inclusivity, because inclusion is a moment-to-moment phenomenon. It's easy to be in a meeting and to be like, well, I'm remote and everyone's just talking, and it's like, I'm not even here.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really like some simple structures of like everybody going around and everybody saying one thing can really shift that dynamic pretty dramatically.
Yeah, one other thing to add too is like having the mindset or even having ambassadors to really ask those who are remote to lean in on meetings as well. So it's easy, I think, if you are remote and everyone else is in a room together, to not really feel like you want to interrupt. So for those who are in the room or who might have a little bit more of a better setup, if you will, to have especially the side conversations, really asking the remote audience, like, hey, Shane, like, what do you think about that? Would love to hear your opinion, and really inviting them in if they might be a little bit quieter because they're the only one, especially dialing in remotely, or just one of a few.
That's actually, I'm going to call out Susan's comment in chat because it's a great one. The toughest part is those side conversations, and the OWL does help with that because it lets you see that someone's talking. So I've been remote before, calling into a room where there's a bunch of people, and then you see two people over there having a whole side conversation, and I'll be the remote person to be like, what are you guys talking about? Like, what did I miss? Because I can't hear you, so tell me what just happened, and forcing them to share.
Yeah, either get an OWL or just kill your single camera for the boardroom. I hate when I log into a virtual meeting, and there's one camera with like 5 people. I immediately know that this is going to be a crap meeting. And so just get rid of it. Buy an OWL or use your individual MacBooks.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or PCs, not to.
You're allowed to use those too.
Awesome. Great. Thank you guys for the commentary. Next up is best practices for checking in on remote teams without being that really terrible, annoying micromanager. So this kind of stems from trust, and would love actually, Shane, for you to take it away. Any best practices or even leadership lessons that you've learned?
Yeah, I feel like this is kind of a soft punt for my product. So thank you, Patrice. So really, look, like what we want continuous feedback and continuous dialogue around important conversations. We do not want micromanagement. And micromanagement is the difference between making people earn trust and assuming that they aren't actually doing their work, and granting trust and actually assuming positive intent. And so if you through our tool, what you're doing is you're asking questions on a weekly basis, having people self-reflect on their week around what's going well, what are their wins, where are their challenges, where are they stuck, giving people high fives, updating the status of their main objectives, how are they feeling, what's their emotional state relating to their work. And what this is tremendous information for the manager, because especially with my distributed team members, I haven't been sitting next to them. I don't know how they're feeling. I don't know what their struggles are. And so having an asynchronous weekly check-in, and again, use our product or use Google Docs. It doesn't matter, but have that asynchronous check-in, because you are going to get a wealth of information, and it's bottom up. So it's not me coming in and saying, gimme, 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 gimme. It's actually creating an invitation to really reveal what's going on. Because, if anybody's ever worked with a coach, you can't actually help somebody if they don't share where they're stuck or what do they want to achieve. And so there needs to be a flow of information. And that's where the asynchronous check-in really comes in, because then you can take that and then you can have a powerful and effective one-on-one. You can check in, you can really actually start that conversation, not with a bunch of status update or small talk. Small talk is good, it builds rapport, but you get into the heart of a coaching conversation right from the beginning. And so it's about having some structure in place for this communication, but also the right mindset of granting trust. Don't make your people earn your trust. Grant them trust. They already got the job. like assume that they're a badass and expect that from them, and you'll be amazed.
Yeah, I love that. I think we get busy in our lives, and I'm guilty of that too. Even just jumping right in and being like, all right, let's go through your sheet. Like what happened last week? And it's so important to take that moment to really ask people how they feel. We did that actually to start a leadership meeting the other day, and a lot of people were having such a hectic work week. And even me personally, I was like, oh, I'm feeling like super deflated. Like I got 2 pieces of bad news today. Like I've been working on this one thing for so long and it's on hold now. And it was really refreshing also just to be able to have the space to share that with my peers and to kick off a meeting that way. It led to like a much better conversation along the way, and just really let everyone kind of comment on how they maybe were feeling similarly or having different opinions. But it was really refreshing and unique way to start a meeting. So I think we're going to adopt it more going forward.
And I think that it really gets to that, like, your people need to know that you're looking out for their best interests.
Mm-hmm.
And if they actually feel that you want the best for them and that you're committed to helping them be and become their best selves, they will not then take a check-in from you as annoying or micromanagement. Mm-hmm. They will have this open dialogue of communication and feedback, and they'll let you know if it's being too much or anything. But mm-hmm. they need to know that you actually care about them personally in order to have that relationship thrive.
Totally. And kind of in a similar vein, would love to hear from you guys how, beyond like the weekly check-in that's a little bit more formal, how do you kind of have the ongoing check-ins throughout the week? Is there a good cadence for that, or does it kind of totally depend? Anything that you guys have adopted with your remote employees?
It definitely depends. So I have the weekly one-on-ones, and then what I try to do is every time they pop into my head to use that as an opportunity to talk to them. So one of my remote people is a salesperson, and all of our sales get piped into Slack automatically. And so when I see that she's had a big win, I make sure to reach out and talk to her about it. Just like, even if it's just a high five or the quick pat on the back. Or likewise, when we have a frustration with the tool, we're having a Gmail sales alias problem right now. Just being, acknowledging this is no fun. I'm sorry it's happening. Is there anything I can do to help you with this? And making the opportunity, because I can have that conversation with my other team members who are right here. But if I've just had it with the 2 sales folks that are in the office, making sure I then also do it in Slack with her.
Mm-hmm. Love that. Susan was just sharing a really great comment too with our panelists over chat that they do a 15-minute huddle every morning to check in and hear. They talk about one positive experience and one quick thing they learned the day before as a great way to kick off the day and just kind of have that nice time to drop in together. I love that, Susan. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I think one thing to add is we have a really, not surprisingly, strong Slack culture. So we rely on Slack, whether we're in the same room or not, as a kind of key communication platform. So, our engineering stand-ups, we do them in Slack, whether or not we're in the same room or not. So that really kind of levels the playing field for, if you're not in the room, you're still in Slack and you're kind of seeing everything in real time.
Yeah, for sure. Great. All right.
One other thing I want to add there that we've been doing a lot of, which is when I do have I'm in the middle of a conversation here with someone that someone remote needs to be a part of, mm-hmm. I just fire up Zoom and call them. There's almost no reason not to. And if I find myself having that moment of being like, oh, I'm going to have to loop in, Bethany and she's not here, I'll just be like, hey, Bethany, got a second? Zoom. And jump on the call and do the meeting, even if it's like around the computer right there, to have the 3-minute conversation and not let technology be the barrier, but just leverage it to let us have the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And like we found too, if it's like going to be more than however many lines of conversation too, like just jump on Zoom. Like also don't let Slack be congesting for someone, right? When you're like, hey, quick a second, like blah, word vomit, right? It's like, it's going to be more than a 1-minute conversation. Like, please jump on Zoom and make that person feel more comfortable too. So
I want to also point out that it's, you'll do no better than to ask each of your remote folks what are their concerns about working remotely? What causes them anxiety about being remote, or where they not feel included or checked in on? And then create some custom solutions for people. If somebody's anxious because they're maybe new to remote working and they feel like they need to work twice as hard to prove that they aren't actually slacking off, which I think happens a lot with distributed folks, that they're like, oh man, I'm a little nervous that people think that I'm just like doing the dishes and hanging out with the cat all day. So I need to work extra hard. Like, let them know that they don't need to do that, so that you can build that sense of like confidence that it is actually okay to be working remotely.
Absolutely. Thank you, Shane. All right, we're going to move on to the next question. Comes in from Carter. So it's one thing to have meetings with employees remotely, but what about those difficult conversations, maybe where someone isn't performing up to standards, or you have some really good feedback to share with someone on how they can improve? How have you guys gone about having those conversations? And Shane, I'd love to start with you again on this one.
Yeah, well, I mean, conversation is kind of a muscle. So if you're having more regular, meaningful conversations, it is going to be easier to have the difficult conversations. So if you're if you're in a continual dialogue around somebody's performance, around what's working and what's not working, it is going to be easier to be able to hop on a Zoom meeting. And I would recommend, I mean, if you are distributed, get on a video call. Being able to see, while it's not perfect, being able to see some of the micro expressions in the face, it allows for a deeper empathetic conversation. And so if you have hard feedback for somebody, being able to share that, at least, video to video, is going to help with that. But don't think that, hard conversations are the only kind of conversations you should be having. Have lots of ongoing dialogue and feedback, so that feedback becomes a normalized thing. And the difficult conversation is going to be just another flavor of an ongoing dialogue that you're already having.
Anyone else want to comment on best practices for your own team?
I mean, I think that's exactly right. I mean, I think in general, the difficult conversations are easier if it's been an ongoing dialogue and you're doing regular one-on-ones and giving feedback. So I think that's especially important when you're remote.
Yeah, absolutely. And we kind of just kicked that off with some kind of an easy entry question, like, how do you feel that XYZ went? Like, maybe if you're specifically asking about a project or a meeting that employee might have led, it feels like a nice soft way to open it up, and it doesn't put your conclusions on the table. It lets the employee really give their opinion first, and might even reveal that they're on the same page already of ways that they might be thinking about improving without you have to force that on them. So yeah, just how do you think that went, or how do you feel about X, we found is a really great entry question.
Yeah, and I think that this goes for in-person versus virtual. Difficult conversations aren't easy by their very nature and definition of the conversation. And so get good at the uncomfortable conversations, and it translates to in-person or virtual. But not by, it's like, just being in person doesn't by just some miracle make it easy to have these dialogues.
No, absolutely. So great. Thank you, everybody. We're going to move on to the next section, which is all about new ideas for celebrating and engaging remote teams. So this is absolutely what I love talking about, team celebration and recognition. Kayla from Pivotal wrote in, how do I scale recognition and celebrations when thinking about my remote team? A few things I'll hit on really quickly. The first is just having a platform that helps you scale. I personally hate going to the post office. It is my least favorite errand ever. So the best way to think about not having to create friction and maybe physically sending things to people across remote teams is a platform that will let you digitally send out gifts, which we do have that ability at Blueboard. But yeah, remove all the friction as possible so that you can share recognition, whether it's virtually, and I know Shane, you'll probably comment on some of the tools you guys have for 15.5, but whether it's things like verbal praise in a platform stream, or digitally sending gifts through a tool like Blueboard, yeah, take the friction off of yourself, make it easy so that can be a seamless experience. We did talk a little bit about shareability. I won't kind of overkill on Blueboard, but did want to share a little bit of what that can look like on Slack specifically. A few awesome examples from our own team just shared over the last few weeks as people have been going out and about and enjoying rewards, whether for starting at the team and taking their family out to museum, taking their boyfriend out to do something really a little bit of challenging their comfort zones, like hang gliding, or just catching up with a loved one at the zoo, for example. As you can see, it's not really just about the photo, and again, kind of sharing that other side of yourself that's not your work self. Really thinking about that work-life integration is really not just that, but also the commentary and the bonding that happens across teams. So we'll use a lot of funny emojis. We're big on making those custom here at Blueboard, and of course, like cheering people on as they get to celebrate their hard work. From there, we also think about those daily moments, whether that's just celebrating anniversaries or not so much anniversaries, but birthdays, things along those lines. And we have leaned on tools like Kudo Board. This is an example from one of our teammates who just celebrated a birthday recently. We do have a practice of rolling these out. We found that when we were one office, of course, doing a hand-signed birthday card was easy, but what happens when you do scale and have remote teams? So we'll launch a Kudo board dedicated to someone on their special day. People can upload funny GIFs, photos, videos, write notes, choose a funny background, and it's been a really amazing way for everybody to still leave a digital message, say thank you to that person, celebrate their birthday, and then of course we reveal that to the employee in their office and bring people on Zoom to cheer them on and like sing happy birthday as well. So it's been a really fun tool for us too.
One of the things we've also done, and this seems crazy, and it is, but there's like a local dive bar right down the street, and that's where we go out to drink when we're celebrating a great month or, you know, anything. And we bring the owl with us, and we set up a video conferencing meeting via the owl at the bar. And I know this sounds really silly and like something I just did from a marketing thing. Our new CEO didn't believe us the first time we all went out and did this. But the remote people, they can dial in, they can high five everybody virtually, they can at least see what's going on. They're not gonna hang out the whole night in front of their computer, whatever, but it's like a fun way for them to at least get to be there a little bit and see the fun and get to celebrate in the toast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. And on that same vein, if we're ever doing team events, we will offer a budget for the employee who might be remote on that team to do something for themselves as well. So maybe if we're all getting drinks, like we'll send them or like reimburse them for getting something on their own, or maybe send them a bottle of wine or things like that. So those small efforts of extension to have a similar, maybe not exactly the same experience, but something so that they still feel like they're included. And then for large events, we also are looking for ways that we can bring the team together in person for bonding.
Yeah. Chris just asked if we've ever had negative feedback about that. We haven't. We also bring the whole team in a couple times a year so that they can come to our divey bar and hang out there with us. It's really delightful. And so we haven't heard anybody being negative about it, but definitely something we'll ask. Yeah. The bar might not like it that much, but we don't listen to them.
Shane, on your end, I know that 15.5 is great for the verbal praise. Any best practices for having that as well as part of your recognition strategy?
Yeah, sure. So one of my favorite concepts that comes from these kind of communities that I'm a part of in the Bay Area that are around authentic relating is this idea of withholds. And a withhold is typically something that you've withheld from somebody that you're close to. And people often think of it as, you know, triggers or resentments or, you know, things that are kind of like constructive or negative feedback. But one of my favorite sayings is that the greatest withhold is withheld love. That we all have all this love and appreciation for the people that we're surrounded by that we don't express. And so one of my favorite things is giving people permission and structure to express that appreciation. And so when you write your weekly 15.5, it asks you to give high fives to people who did great work and that made a difference in your week. And what happens, you know, I mean, just this year, I think we've given 43,000 high fives internally at our tiny little 100-person company. And so when you get into this cadence of prompting people to share the positive impact that other people had on them in both public and private channels, what you do is you build a culture of appreciation. where it becomes normal and okay to really let people know that you made a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so cool because this is one of these features that we built like in a week, you know, we're like, yeah, let's just do that. And it's turned out to be one of the most popular, the most effective ways at elevating a culture and creating this culture of recognition. And we don't tie it to rewards, we don't have points or anything. And so that there's a purity to it. It's more of an intrinsic motivation that, look, like Morgan, I want to appreciate you for being an amazing facilitator and keeping this show running and asking great questions. And so humans are good at appreciation if you give them a little bit of structure and teach them what goes into an effective appreciation. And it's just magical what happens.
Yeah, I can't agree with that more. Like the base layer is getting comfortable giving recognition daily, whether that's written, verbal, etc. And a good tool on that is really understanding also how your team likes to receive recognition. Not everybody likes to be praised at a town hall. They might want private, conversation with their manager. Some might love that. Some might want to have lunch with their CEO as a way to have more recognition, right? So another kind of segue is like thinking about that language of appreciation and really what is most meaningful to your employee to make sure that it is personalized for them. But yes, the base layer and showing that the company is dedicated to recognition and that whether it's leadership or ICs are able to recognize each other fluidly is so important. And then you can build from there and think about those milestones where maybe a bigger recognition moment is important.
Well, one other ritual that I really want to throw in here, because I think it's such a key to our culture, is this thing that we do called Question Friday. And so every Friday, we take half an hour, the whole company comes on to a Zoom call. There's a question master for the month, and that question master asks a question that is designed to kind of get people to share stories about their lives, whether they're past or their present or their future. And then we split into Zoom groups, so breakout rooms. We used to do just one, but now that we're larger, we split it into groups. And then everybody goes around and answers the question. And it's pure human connection. There's no profit agenda. It's not about productivity. It's just this chance for people to share their unique stories and their unique perspectives. And that, I think, is actually one of the best recognition tools we have, because it allows the individual to share their story. And there's nothing we want more than to be seen and valued for our unique story that we bring to the table.
Absolutely. So we have time for one more question. I'm going to quickly read through that. I'm going to jump into this notion of, Andrea shared the question of, besides meeting a couple times a year, how do you really not only keep up the commitment to each other, but on that notion of engaging your remote workforce, how do you continue to build the team spirit and motivation and thinking about managing these remote teammates? Dan, I'm going to pass it over to you to start, because we are getting close to the hour. I'm going to go ahead and pull up our SHRM certification code, which is 19NSPTT. Feel free to jot that down. I'll leave that on screen. But Dan, feel free to jump in with your initial thoughts.
Awesome, sure. So we have, as I mentioned earlier, a ton of fully remote teams that use Donut. And one of the ways that they use it is actually to help keep that connection and keep folks really empathizing with their teammates. So basically, our tool will match them up with somebody new, could be weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly. And what a lot of teams do to kind of make it more social with the entire team is two folks will connect on a Zoom or on a video conference, share something personal, learn something about each other, and then actually frequently take a selfie of that meeting, repost it in a Slack channel with a little commentary about something that they learned about somebody else on the team. So that sort of creates this kind of social human moment that in an office may just happen organically, but we're able to kind of create those moments for people that then get shared and kind of built upon.
Wonderful. And we're actually using Connections as well. It's been such a great tool, especially for meeting with our teammates in Europe. And we are mindful, of course, of like time changes and things like that. And then mostly having those meetings remotely. But when we can meet in person, if you're matched with someone in your own office, we are able to expense like a coffee or an actual donut if you want to go get those. But it's been such a great tool for connecting teams who don't typically work together regularly. Great.
Yeah, and I know several of our European developers much better than I would if I hadn't used Donut.
Cool. Great to hear.
And I love the idea of snapshotting it to create these cultural artifacts.
Yeah, that really kind of brings the whole team into the fold, and also can really create momentum in your organization for other people joining in, because they're really seeing the outcomes of the donut meetings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and actually just on engagement as well and kind of keeping the team spirit up, the other question that we were wanting to get to is really around values and what those play into the company, especially with remote. Values can be another great way when those are stemmed from leadership and really cascaded around the entire organization, remote or not, is a really great way to, again, like continue that drumbeat, continue towards shared goals. Something that we do is really thinking about value awards that are given out at our annual retreat every year. To really display like and recognize those that are living our values, and everyone is in person, so those remote employees are able to be part of the celebration or be in person if they're receiving a reward themselves. But we also really make it part of our daily vocabulary. We'll use hashtags on Slack that represent values if we are doing some verbal praise, celebrating people who have really lived a value. We even have some Slack channels dedicated to some of our values as well. So that's been really valuable as a way for people to aggregate commentary for really how we're living them daily, but again, recognizing bigger achievements at the end of the year as a team. Great. If anyone else wants to share final words related to engagement, values, keeping the spirit up, we'll take them for one more minute. Anything else, panelists, you guys want to share?
One thing is, it's like continue to push the envelope, test, experiment. Like I was just talking with a really cool company that has a interesting virtual reality tool where you have high fidelity audio, and you can really see, like, as you get closer to people in the virtual world, they get louder. And I'm going to try this out for a virtual happy hour for all of our distributed people. And like I try to give our distributed team cool things first ahead of the rest of the company, because often it's the people in HQ that get the cool things first. And so if you can give the distributed folks the cool thing, it's just a way of balancing.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. And just as we close out, any final kind of takeaways, like from the panelists, if you were to share one thing to start doing tomorrow for your remote teams, anything you want to share?
I learned something I'm going to start tomorrow. So I think I'm going to try Shane's idea of hosting the team and splitting off into groups to share something personal about ourselves for our team meeting tomorrow.
It works so well.
Yeah, I love it.
I mean, I think it's all about creating the human connection. There were a bunch of great ideas here that I think we're going to try in terms of giving people icebreakers and opportunities on a regular basis to kind of share some personal things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, on my end, just from a leadership perspective, was loving some of the ideas around really asking if people feel comfortable working remote, what kind of hesitations they have. And I have a teammate who just started being remote, so that's really top of mind for me as her manager. So yeah, having more comfort asking those questions, opening up the space, and really thinking about how we leverage learnings from our engagement survey around remote workplaces and flexible environments to think about some change we can bring to the organization as well. But yeah, Shane, thank you for the leadership tips.
I'm super intrigued about bringing our Owl camera to a bar.
It doesn't do well with alcohol, so keep it sober.
Only for the first 30 minutes. What first? All right, well, we're gonna go ahead and wrap up today. Thank you for all of our panelists. Keep us posted if you have questions, look out for the recording and recap, and we will see you next time. Thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.
Bye.